copying and leaping. I know you can read it on the board, but somebody give me your own words. Don't look at the board. Where's jumping? See, that's a vertical leap. And that's a specific type, but we don't talk about that in this textbook. However, a vertical leap is a developmental skill also that you're not going to cover in here. At its simplest form, jumping is taking off on 2 feet manually. You usually like to volunteer jumping with the class? Please. Come on. Are you hurt?
Yeah.
Where are you hurt?
For ACL.
You tore your ACL. Did anybody else not tear their ACL? You coming in for class?
No, we had to take that test for Dr. Ball's
Okay, it's probably in the office.
in the office.
Probably.
Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me, Dr. Colbert, can I interrupt you for a second? That's how you're supposed to interrupt the class. Excuse me for 1 second. Kids. They're all kids. Who wants to demonstrate jumping? Come on, don't be scared. Thank you. See? Non-torn ACL. Come to the front so we can get it on video. I want you to jump as far as you can. I just want you to jump as far as you can. Okay, good. Fine? Perfect. Thank you very much.
That might be.
Now, I'm sure on your test, you're going to have to look for the critical components of jumping. We'll talk about those in a second, but how many people caught the critical components name? IB. IB. How many of you saw the critical components of IB gent? What did you see? What was one critical component?
Some arm swing.
And what was that swing?
Forward.
And forward and
Up.
And up.
and how? How? That's not specific. Yeah, good. So we saw some arm swing, but as all novices are, we kind of said we saw some arm swing, it went back, it went up. But that's probably not good enough for your test, I would assume, in here. However, so what's the best way to practice learning critical components if you wanted to study jumping?
Review it over and over.
Yeah, get your roommate, get your buddies, and practice jumping. What I always told my class when I taught this was have people do it incorrectly also. Right? That way, when they do it incorrectly, you can say, no, you should do this. So let's take a minute and let's look at some jumping. Right? Let's do that, because that's fun. I don't know if Dr. Wall goes over these videos, but I love watching them jump. Would you hit the lights for me? Just the first bank, please. All right, so this didn't download. Good. Arms. Arms moved, right? They swung up. What was the difference between IB's jump and this little girl jumping? How are the arms looking here?
First go up and down and up backwards.
Yeah, I call that trying to flap and fly like a bird. That is a developmental aspect of jumping. It's a constraint. What do you think is the big difference, just overall, between IB and this little girl? Don't get real specific. Obviously, what's the two biggest differences between IB and this little girl? Come on. Strength. So part of becoming a proficient jumper of your constraint is physical. Is physical. But her arms move, they just didn't move, we're going to keep it simple right now, like IB's. IB's had a forward 45-degree angle push. Her jump is what?
She extends her arms away from the body.
Yeah, it's like, it's still, yeah, the arms are like flapping, but how does your jump look? She goes up and down. IB went forward, 45 degrees. Hers is more up and down. See it? Up and down. We'll come back. We'll come back. A little bit more similar to what I would say IV's was. What are the arms doing here? Arms are now used for what? Propulsion. Arms are now used for propulsion. And a little girl, those arms were not used for propulsion. They were hopping, flying like a bird. Excuse me, I should not use the word hopping. Flapping like a bird. She went up, she went down. This young man's arms, backwards, forwards at a 45-degree movement. They are actually used for propulsion. Let's take another look before we get into talking about jumping a little bit more. This guy's great. Look at this. Bam! Right? Watch. Talk about arms here. What about arms here?
Just go back.
They're used for balance. They don't go back until after this little child lands. So arms here are not flapping. So we would call that a little bit different constraint. One more time. What about the legs? What's going on with the legs? If you're just comparing those three that we saw already. So all of you watched Ivy jump, and all of you are watching these two kids jump, the adult jump, but yet none of you are picking up on the key constraints. Right? None of you can pick up on the key constraints, which is part of the process of learning about these motor skills. Right? And in Newell's model, how many constraints do we have? 3. What are they?
Environmental task and individual.
Yes. So what are some of the task constraints here?
Maybe the floor.
That could be the floor, could be the shoes. I don't know about you, but as you get older, some of the clothes you wear don't fit like they should, right? You have that problem. Let's look one more. Constraints.
Violence.
I always laugh at these videos, not because why you think, but because most of you are athletes. And if you actually saw your form on video, you'd laugh at yourself too, because most of it's so terrible that you were able to get away with a good swing growing up. And if you're playing in college, it means that you were probably the better one in your high school team, but it probably doesn't mean that your swing is good, right? Or your throw is good. If every college athlete had a good throwing technique as a quarterback, we wouldn't need the NFL Combine to tell us which quarterback threw a better technique, right? Right? And so, think about that now in terms of a child developing. If our pro athletes don't have the best technique, and our college athletes surely don't, and surely not at a Division II school, right? So then what do we expect of little kids' techniques? They're constraints. And you have a constraint as a college athlete, they have a constraint as a pro athlete, and this child has a constraint. What's the one key concept here that you didn't see in the other ones, that we have not seen? He only lands on one foot, yeah. Probably individual constraint. Right? Maybe just needs a little point or two to land. However, one of the key characteristics of jumping is taking off on 2 feet and landing on 2 feet. Landing on 2 feet. So let's look at earlier jumping. Let me go ahead and make this here. Would you turn on the back, bang the lights for me? Perfect. So, jumping vertically, like we talked about, right? Up and down. Up and down. And there's no preparatory movements. The child walks up there and jumps. However, you did see a preparatory movement in that little boy who was jumping on your screen right to left. You saw that. So you know that there is a developmental difference between the little girl and that little boy. People should be able to perform vertical or a standing long jump. And simple jumping is usually done before the age of 2. Okay? However, you guys go over there to the Child Development Center, right? And you're going to be doing the test of gross motor skills on those children, correct? And have you done jumping yet? Yeah. One of the key things that you'll do when you do that test is you'll notice very quickly that you are too complicated with those children. Right? I want you to jump from here to here as far as you can. And sometimes you'll get way too complicated with your instructions. Just have them jump as far as they can. Proficient jumping. Proficient jumping. Now, in this textbook, it uses a constraints approach. Some of you may be looking at it in terms of developmental levels. In this class, it's really, you go from a novice to a proficient jumper. And it's based on those constraints, remember, that gets us to that proficient jumping. And it's overcoming those constraints that gets us to proficient jumping. One of the ways we speed up those constraints is through what? Yeah, I mean, if you took a dynamical systems approach, the number of hours practicing jumping, that's going to get you to become a proficient jumper. However, if you were a baseball pitcher and I said just go out and pitch for 10,000 hours, would you be a proficient pitcher? Maybe, maybe not, we don't know. You, like every other child probably in America, went to baseball practice and you had a coach providing feedback. Now, feedback, if done properly, can speed up the constraints, reduce those constraints. But if it's poor coaching, which is really just giving improper feedback at the wrong time, at the wrong schedules, but that's a different lecture. But all of you are a byproduct of how you developed your constraints, right? So I watched the softball games last week. I know softball players. Yeah, right? So what happened in the second game? Why did we go behind so early at the second game?
Probably because we got ahead of ourselves.
Got ahead of yourselves. What does that mean?
We probably assumed that we were going to blow by the next game and just call it.
Yeah. So if we look at that statement, what does that mean? Which constraint did they not fulfill? Yeah, and what part of the subsection of individual? Yeah. I would have said, well, you probably just got outplayed in the first few innings, right? I mean, an objective person watching the game would consider, oh, 2 teams, it is University of Southwest, so if anyone's watching this, we don't give them much credit, right? And that's what you didn't do. However, maybe they got mad from losing game 1 and came out real hot in the first couple of innings, and your task constraints weren't up to their task constraints, and it took you a number of innings. So there's a different way to look at all those things. As most college athletes would, if you lose a game, it was not the other team just beating you, it was always your fault. And that's good, unless you go to that every time you lose. You're 0-24, and it's always, that's a different story too. But it's good. You recognize that part of the constraint, functional part of the constraint, was a limiter in that performance. Do you think, though, over at the CDC, when you go over there to give the test of gross motor skills, that all those kids are really going to want to do the things you ask them to do? Yeah, of course not. So just like you fall behind University of Southwest, those kids may be able to perform better. We just don't see it because of the typical constraints. Correct? Yeah. And so on a proficient jumper, everything we talked about, arms moving back, forward 45 degrees, so we're extending outward, not upward. All of that can be done. You can also limit the task constraint. Have you already done throwing in here? Yep, so stand up for me. There. Throw that to me. So if we just watched her, she's not a proficient thrower, right?
Right.
Good? You're not a proficient thrower. You play softball for our team, but you're not a proficient thrower. Okay, so throw that at me. Yeah. So again, not a proficient thrower, right? What does she have to do to be a proficient thrower? So why weren't you doing that?
Because you're really close.
Yeah, so remember, the task, you start to look for these things, and based on the task, you can call someone to not be proficient in a certain skill even though you can. All right, so we talk about jumping, and especially in little kids, the task constraint can really influence proficiency. So if it's not set up properly, you're not going to see the differences between a proficient jumper and a novice jumper based on the constraints that you have. Right? And it's icy outside, so if we're watching people walk around outside, the environmental and the task constraints are interacting to cause you to shorten your gait. Right? Okay, so those are real life applications for using task constraints. I showed you my videos. However, it isn't guaranteed that every child will master jumping. We hope so, right? But I would be willing to lay 5 cents down and say that in the 1960s and 70s, most children have mastered jumping. I'd be willing to bet 10 cents that a lot of the children that are growing up now are never going to master jumping. Why?
Not as much opportunity to go outside.
Yeah. You said just practice. You said not as many opportunities to go outside. It's all the same, right? If you are not practicing certain skills, you're never going to be proficient at them, right? I'm never going to win the U.S. Open. Why? I didn't pick up golf until I was out of college, right? So there's a little kid out there who's 9 years old, who's practicing golf all the time, and is going to be a better, more proficient golfer. What does that mean? His or her swing is better, his or her putting is better, his or her chipping is better, the functional constraints of reading the course is going to be better. So they will probably reach the mastery of a complicated sport like golf, but you can even say the same things in regards to simple gross motor skills, based on some of the things that you talked about. Now, is it that simple? Of course not. It's going to be a lot more complicated than that. There are other factors that happen. However, in general, those are probably pretty good generalizations about why children are less likely to master some of these skills now. Because I don't even know if they teach rope skipping in class, jump rope. Right? I mean, when I grew up, everyone was jumping rope in PE. You're lucky to have PE now. And I guarantee that the kids are probably playing Grand Theft Auto or Call of Duty rather than out jumping the rope, right? Good. But continuous growth in body size, we've already talked about it. Strength is one of the biggest limiting factors or factors as you start to jump, right? It's also a function of power. As you go on in your courses, if I wanted to just line my 3 softball players up, I can determine power based on how far that they can jump, right? Then we can say A, B, and C. A has more power, B has middle power, and C is less power. What does power function of on the base pad? We run the bases faster, right? So you can take these and use them later. Right now we're just talking about developmental skills, but you can use these as functional skills later. We test power in athletes with the vertical jump, though. It's quantifiable, a lot easier. You can measure it down really quickly. So in general, someone who can't jump as high, less power, a low block. You see where that's going. Some of the rate limiters in jumping, enough force, which is a byproduct of strength, Does Dr. Wall put these on Blackboard for you guys to see your writing? She does. So hopping, what's hopping? Not bar hopping. Right? What's hopping?
Sure.
If jumping is starting on 2 feet and landing on 2 feet, hopping is and standing on that same foot. I might as well jump ahead. You saw the slide already, but leaping is starting on 1 foot and landing on the other foot. Jumping is starting on 2 feet, landing on 2 feet. Hopping is starting on 1 foot and landing on that same foot as you go. Who wants to demonstrate hopping? Somebody does. IB gets the extra credit points today. Everybody else gets docked points for participation in class. So I am going to have you though, I want you to hop not as fast as you can, but not as slow as you can, all the way to the door and then back. Do you mind doing it again though, this time as fast as you can? Good, very proficient hopper. Thank you. You ask that, do that with kids, and you're gonna see some really weird things. That's my words, not technical scientific terminology. You're gonna see legs start to fly all over the place, hands start to move. Proficient hoppers, very controlled, legs carried low, arms are used but not carried high. So there's lots of different things going on, okay? Everybody saw IB, right? Very good, proficient hopper. Let's look at some little kids, because this is fun. Not IB. What's the first thing you noticed right away?
The legs started going farther.
Started to lose balance. Where's his leg being carried? Higher or lower? High. So, very different than IB. IB is able to continue and not lose balance. He was able to hop for a long time. So one of the things that you look for in proficient jumpers and non-proficient jumpers is how long can they hop? It's a big characteristic. And think about it in terms of Newell's model. There's a lot of things that have to happen for IB to hop from here to here. Both functional and, what's the other one in individual? Structural. Both functional and structural. A lot of things that go on. Dare I say, if you've ever been dumb in your life and been pulled over, the police may ask you to stand on one foot and count to 30 out loud. Right? One of the limiting factors there is if you've been drinking too much and break the law, that you have a lot of structural issues going on. The same thing happens though in novice. The novice ones aren't drunk and trying to hop, right? But they're still trying to figure out their systems, right, and the interaction between those systems. So hopping now is a little bit more complex than jumping. So it's mastered a little bit later, right? But you should have been able to deduce that, without me sitting up here talking about it. And if you're in this class, you should start to look at performance, human development, and say, all right, this child is different. What's going on with this child? Well, we're going to look at it in terms of individual, task, and environmental constraints. How many kids do you think practice hopping out there at the CDC? I don't know, man, they playing hopscotch? My son never did hopscotch. My two daughters, they do hopscotch all the time. I don't know why. They went to the same school, right? One's going to be hopscotching all over the place. And it's funny, the 6-year-old can't hop worth a darn. The 3-year-old is a master. So even individually, same parents, offspring, one is more proficient at 3 than they are at 6. Individual constraints, right? Individual constraints. Let's look at this child one more time, and we'll go and look at some other ones. And you get it. I mean, watch. Right here, he loses balance. Boom. Arms are carried lower. Not losing balance and hop without falling. Legs carried lower. Let's look at the legs one more time, because a lot of people don't cue in on the difference between the leg that's, and you should be able to spot it right now, see? It's actually carried a little bit forward. One of the things that we look for in proficient hoppers is the positioning of the leg. In novice hoppers, the leg's carried in front. In proficient hopper, the leg is carried behind. This class gets done 11:50, right? All right, I'm already behind. It's okay. Let's pick it out. Somebody give me a number between 1, 2, and 15. 7. Old man hopper. Yeah, you know, you'd say this is a very difficult one to, however, I hate to break it to you, but, you know, skills follow a bell curve, so to speak, right? So you become very proficient at them, and as much as you'd like to say it, you're never going to be able to hit the ball like you do right now. And this is your peak performance time, in general for most people. It's this time between 16 and 25. It's all downhill for males at 25, and females, I'm sorry, it's all downhill around 18. Now we have lots of different technology to keep that going, but in general, all downhill for 25. Downhill around 18 for females. Now we've got, again, lots of training techniques to help us keep those high. However, very difficult, because you'd say, all right, well, the knee is carried behind a little bit low, but the arms are really being used for propulsion. So let's look and see what we're talking about here, okay? Because that was a good, whoever picked number 7 probably, we talked before class, and that's what we do. So swing leg moves through the full range of motion. Oppositional arm movement generates force, and the support leg is flexed on landing. So you still see some of that with our older individual. You definitely don't see that with the young individual. And with both IB and I'm going to call it the college age student, you see both of those. It's not a stiff-legged hop. My 6-year-old, stiff-legged hop. 3-year-old, good support. Good support and flexion when they land. So, more than likely, I need to find an activity that my younger one can do, and be lots of gymnastics. 6-year-old, probably swimming. Never going to run a day in her life, probably. Just individual constraints, functional structure. Probably a good swimmer. Wrong place in the country though to be a swimmer, right? Right. So, therefore, I have to go find a job in California or Florida, or the upper Midwest. Not a lot of water to go swim in here. Proficient hopping. Proficient hopping. Questions on this? Not difficult. What kills everybody, in my experience with this class, is you talk about it here, and it goes one ear and out the other. What is the best way to practice learning these skills for test time? Yeah, have your roommate watch them. And in fact, have you do them incorrectly, right? So you'll look at the book, you'll read about it, and then you'll perform it incorrectly on purpose. And what are you doing? You're helping yourself study for the test, right? Because now you have to make yourself. If I told the IB to come up here and hop like a novice hopper, it's going to really mess him up, right? He's going to have to actually think about doing it incorrectly. But proficient hoppers don't have to think about it. That's more of a board learning type of things. Some of the developmental changes that we see, few children 3 and older can hop repeatedly. So with that first statement, you go over to the CDC. If you get one of those little small children that's 3 and 4 years old, and they can hop, boom, 10 steps, what should you be saying? Great job. Yeah. This individual has really mastered hopping in terms of those 3 interacting constraints. What are you most likely going to see over there in terms of hopping? I can't do it. And they're going to do 1, 2, and that's it. 1, 2, 3 at the most probably, and that's it. More than likely it's going to be 1, and then they put their foot down. Or even like my little daughter who's going to be hopscotching all over the place. Most of this is a structural adaptation in terms of functional too. Remember, we look at Newell's model in terms of the interaction among systems. And so there's a neurological, physiological, component here that has to work together. So I can do the same thing to you, pat your head, rub your stomach, right? Pat your head, rub your stomach, sing the alphabet now. Can't do it. It's just too much for you. Now, if you practice it enough times, you could. Due to at least in part the interaction among the constraints within the framework, the principles of motion is where these interactions between functional and structural happen. We kind of just already talked about that. That's where you see the biggest problems. Once they master that though, and again, we've kind of talked about it. We've kind of talked about it in terms of, do you think that children these days get enough practice hopping? Yeah, no, not at all. And in fact, if you probably did this 30 years ago, and you did this today, and Dr. Wallace collecting data now for the new norms for this, and I haven't talked to her, but I would bet when she's done collecting data on norms, that we see a shift in the ages of proficiency. Because right now we have pretty good norms of when these people are supposed to be good proficient hoppers. Just like you would see in softball, right? When do you go to full fast pitch in softball? What age?
Full, like fast.
Yeah, full fast pitch. Yeah, about 10 years old. You would be a little worried if you had a league that said girls are going to start full fast pitch at 6 and 7. One, they don't have the functional or structural power, coordination to execute it. And two, why would you do that? From pure, if you want to make the best, if you were a softball coach in, let's say, Albuquerque, and you wanted to get all the best girls, you want them to have other skills mastered first before you move into that, right? So, and then hitting takes forever, throwing forever, catching as you learn. It's a byproduct of lots of, so why would you start the full sport then? But there is a move in lots of circles to specialize in one sport early on and stay with it. Right? When we know all the research says that if you want to become the best softball player, you probably should play basketball too. And probably soccer, since there's a lot of footwork involved coming out of the batter's box. So you need to develop good footwork and good hand-eye coordination. So you've got 3 sports you should probably play if you want to do soccer, but that's just unrealistic. Why? Because I have 3 kids and they all play sports, and every one of their coaches in each sports wants them to just play that single sport year-round now. Then the kids get punished. So my son plays soccer, baseball, and basketball. Right? The baseball and soccer are the worst. By far, baseball and soccer are the worst. Soccer coaches don't want them playing baseball in the spring because that gets, just terrible. And all the kid wants to do is what? Play, have fun. Majority of our kids are going to drop out middle school anyways, right? So why do we specialize? Just let them have some fun. Now, did I say everybody deserves a trophy? That's a different argument. My 3-year-old won't get a trophy though. All she cares about is snacks and trophy. And again, once the game's over, she could care less what the score was. She didn't even know. All she knows is she got some Cheetos, a juice box, and a trophy. Right? And where does the trophy end up in 2 years? In the trash. But she remembers those Cheetos. Guarantee it. If you've got cousins, nieces, and nephews, or if you decide to have kids when you get older, Cheetos, juice box, and trophy. That's all they care about. All they care about. I want to go into, before we get here, I want to show you the video because it's a good lead in to here. And I'm sure you've already done running. All right. So running, jumping, and hopping are all considered, what we can consider gross motor skills. And your book breaks these down even farther, correct? And when you get into throwing, we call them ballistic skills, right? And manipulative skills for catching. However, hopping, running, and jumping all are a byproduct of structural constraint and strength. And if you just look at them, they're all very similar in terms of lower body movements, right? arms are carried lower. In this case, stride is increased. Flexion occurs. And so I'm going to show you one more time so you can make the connection of why these three skills are grouped together. Now, running is obviously a natural extension of walking. You've already studied that. But the other two can be considered a second and third cousin to running because they're a byproduct of strength. So I've let you, and hopefully you've been watching this person run. And if we go back and look at jumping one more time. Is a byproduct of the other skills also. They're second and third cousins, so not directly related. So just because you can run real early in life doesn't mean you're going to be a track star. And just because you can run real early doesn't mean you can hop real early. There's a whole bunch of other constraints going on there. Remember that, right? So if you have a child or your niece or nephew can run and has great form, and they go to jumping and hopping, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. Okay? It doesn't mean that the child who's 6 years old and can throw the ball from center field to home plate and can hit and pitch is going to be a college softball player. We know that's not true. And in fact, on most of our college sports, the ones who were not the best players when they were little become the better players as they get older. Why?
More practice.
Puberty, right? No, I mean, you're talking about in both male and female sports. Softball's a power sport, right? Who can hit the ball farthest? Who can throw it harder than anybody else? At the end of the day, that's what. If you've got a pitcher in softball who's overpowered, you're not going to lose a game, right? And in football, if you can outpower the other opposition at each position, look, I know it's more complicated than that. Don't get me wrong, right? Because then we just get the people who can bench press them the fastest. It's not the case. I understand that. Okay, but I'm just trying to make a point. Is that when you look at children as they develop, puberty is one of the biggest indicators of who's going to be successful. Because then you have distribution of body fat, right? And you have things called relative strength, right? And you have proportion. And look, I was never going to be a football player, even though that's all I wanted to do growing up. But if you just put me and IB next to each other, you can tell right away. IB much broader shoulders, right? Distribution of body fat, totally different. Those are individual constraints. You don't have as many of those until kids go through puberty, right? And it's also not a question really of why children drop out of sport in middle school. Most of them are starting to go through puberty. And those ones that were really good before puberty usually aren't as good. In general, there's always exceptions. There's always exceptions. Right? And in just about every sport that's played in America, it's a power sport. Or is becoming a power sport. Football, power sport. Soccer's becoming a power sport. Right? There's very few Messis in the world. But there are a lot of big, strong, fast soccer players. Lots of them. I'm not talking about the outliers. There's never going to be a LeBron James or Michael Jordan again. Right? It's not. Don't worry about the outliers. If I'm going to be a college coach, I want to find as many of these, what they call blue chippers as possible. Right? And that's how you have a successful team. However, you're a really successful national champion softball player if you have two great pitchers. Right? And in football, if you've got a great quarterback and some really good defensive backs. Chase would be able to get into more of that, not me. I still play Madden, that's as far as I get on organizing my team. Okay? Basketball, right? Power. Because if it was all about height, then every college basketball team would be 7-footers. And is there even a center position in basketball hardly? Yeah, not really. There's not going to be another Hakeem Olajuwon. And the position's gone, right? Because you have a lot of these other people, faster, about similar height, stronger, same thing. All right, so galloping, sliding, and skipping, a little bit different now. All of these are a little bit more difficult. And in fact, which is the most difficult up there? It's the most difficult one up there to do. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Skipping. How many kids will put a broomstick between their legs and gallop around the house? Galloping is actually a lot easier than sliding for kids. Because it's a little bit easier movement. In terms of functional, remember we were talking about the interaction of systems? A little bit easier. Skipping, by far the most difficult. I wonder how many of you, if I asked you to skip, could do it proficiently. You want to take that challenge? Yeah, I bet it would take you about 10 trials to learn how to skip again. I'm serious, right? If we just went up here and you tried to skip, you would probably do terrible up and back. And you start to get the hang of it. So about the 10th trial, you'd be back to where you were when you were in kindergarten, second grade, third grade, not kindergarten. So, however, all of these skills, though, are dependent. And I would bet that Dr. Wall gave you, or it's in your book, like this, right? And what's down here? And as you go up the skills, you can't learn these skills unless you learn this skill first. Right? And at the very top is Dr. Culpepper, right? And let's see, Michael Jordan, and LeBron James, right? We're at the very top. Where are you? You're down in here. You know, I mean, that's what we're talking about. So these skills, I think if I remember your triangle correctly, actually fall right here, because walking, jumping are down here. These are reflexes and stereotypes. Okay, but I don't have that in front of me. So, but galloping, sliding, skipping are all combinations of skills that have to be learned prior. So, do you think that any of these kids at the CDC are going to skip? What do you think? Yeah, we got a maybe, someone definitely shaking their head no. Yeah, the answer is going to be no. In general, you will always have a few outliers. They're not going to be able to gallop, slide, or skip. Could they do it at a novice level? Yes, but they're not going to be proficient. Does it mean that you won't have someone that's going to get out there and skip? Yeah, no. Yeah, so you probably will have one, probably a girl, who's going to skip around. Run out of time really quickly. I have to fly through this, so I'm sorry. Down, one step, other step, just like a horse. It's a horse. Right? Slide, what's slide? Slide?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Slide. Slide.
What's steady on?
Not a shuffle, slide. The correct term is a slide. Now you obviously will put sport-specific terms into yours, but so skip, gallop like a horse, all the way around. Sliding. Sliding very difficult. Early galloping, sliding, and skipping, little no arm movement, little or no trunk rotation, exaggerated vertical lift, and short stride length or step length. As you get more proficient, remember, it's a second cousin to your other skills. And so they're related. You have to master those other ones. Once you master the other ones, then you get these little or no arm movement. This is the biggest one in terms of dynamical systems from Newell's model. You unfreeze these, right? You put them in situations that cause them to unfreeze. So if you're designing activities for kids all the way up to 5 years old, it should all be doing this, right? You shouldn't be playing soccer or baseball or football, right? Because if you want better baseball, softball, or football players, they better learn these here first, and then learn these, and then you can start to get into sports. I highly recommend that you go out to a soccer game at 6, 7, 8 years old and just watch. And watch the kids who are stiff. From a dynamical systems approach, they just need to be unfrozen. More hours practicing. Don't expect them to kick a ball. They can't run. I don't mean they can't run, but they're not proficient runners yet. So you're asking them to do a skill that they're not proficient at and kick a ball. Or they can't throw the ball, but you're asking them to throw somebody out running to first base. Are there kids, though, that can do that? Yes, they go on those select traveling teams that specialize when they're younger. Everybody catches up at middle school. Boom, puberty hits, and those kids that are really good when they were younger probably aren't the best kids anymore. So don't worry about it. If you want to specialize, it's your choice. Then puberty comes. And puberty is a... Somebody said it, I won't repeat it. It is. Except for me, I was so beautiful and handsome. I didn't have to worry about middle school dances at all. Yeah, I sat behind the food cart. I was scared of dances. I didn't go to dance again until prom. So, proficient, almost proficient. They can use their arms for other purposes. Their arms straighten dramatically. They're no longer needed for balance. That's the big one. Galloping is the first to emerge. Sliding comes next. Skipping, 47 years old. So again, should we expect any of the children over at the CDC to skip? No, we should see gallopers, and we should see some sliders. Okay? Sliding is the coordination. Turning to one side, right? Remember I showed you, you guys had a discussion about what sliding was. I showed you, you turn to the side and you go. So if they don't turn to the side and go, it's not sliding. They're novice at it. They're not proficient at it. A lot of these kids will have trouble between galloping and sliding. A lot of these kids will have trouble between galloping and sliding. One, because they have to turn their body. Right? Other locomotor skills. Last slide, because I want to give you time on Wednesday to do your project. Remember, if you don't have any idea what your project is, ask these people over here. And so we can move in lots of different ways. But why is walking? And why don't you all skip to class? I dare you, go skip to class. Right? Why don't you skip to class?
You look strange.
It's more fundamental than that. Think in terms of constraints. Walking's easier, but be scientific about it.
It takes us energy.
Yeah, you want to, you've learned from Newell's model that you're going to choose the form of motion that is best economical to you. Right? And so in terms of the task, now obviously you can't skip up steps, so now the task has changed. But functional and structurally, you're going to choose one of these that's easiest. However, I would encourage you to skip. One, it's going to make you feel a lot better. It will. Think about it. If you just skip, none of you are going to do it, but I hope you some of you will. You just skip from here to the bathroom, your whole day will change. I guarantee this. You will have a smile on your face. Once you get a smile on your face. Okay, so Friday, what are those projects do you